Traditionalists and our Fridays with Father Geckel show. Today we're doing a bit of a panel here. Um, we've got joined with good one of the hosts of the Traditionalists, Michael Physiologus. It's easier to say Michael than Physiologus, but there it is. Joining us from Poland, and then Nicholas from Canada. He's been on the show with Kevin on Catholic Family Podcast a couple times. If you haven't checked those out, they're really good listens. I very much enjoyed them. So we wanted to have him on today to talk about some of the things going on in Canada. Um, we're going to talk a little bit about, I call him Pope Bob of Chicago, or some people call him Leo the 14th. Um, but first off, we're going to be talking about controversy with Jordan Peterson that I think it's been about a month since this came up, where he was on the Joe Rogan podcast and then he was on Fox News calling out the woke right. He frames it. I don't exactly know what that means, but saying that there's a bunch of psychopaths saying Christ is king, and there's a lot of pushback against that. And we're going to just kind of go into the little bit of the story of that and see how that goes. But first of all, Nicholas, if you could just do a brief introduction. This is the first time on the Traditionalist channel, so if you could just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do.
Sure. Thank you, Father. And it's a pleasure to be here. I've enjoyed being on Catholic Family Podcast, so it's great to be on the Traditionalists. So I'm a lawyer. I've been doing law here in Canada for about 20 years. Criminal defense work is what I do. I've been a traditional Catholic since 2003, although I've been a sedevacantist. Well, I always was a sedevacantist. I did enough research to realize that I was actually a sedevacantist in 2012, and so I attend the CMRI chapel since then in London, Ontario. Married, 5 kids, and some people may know me from the True Restoration podcasts. I was involved in that several years ago, and so I do a law-based YouTube channel called Don't Talk TV. But I'm glad I want to be able to do some more Catholic-focused things. So I appreciate the opportunity to join you.
Yeah, that's great. We have a chat group where the host and Nicholas is on there too, and it's always a a great conversation. Um, and having Nicholas on there has been a great addition. And Michael, how have you been? We haven't seen much of you lately on the Traditionalists, but
Well,
really glad you're able to join today.
yes, sorry about disappearing for a bit. Almost all Lent, I think. Well, I've been doing pretty great. We actually have presidential elections in Poland now.
Okay.
We'll be voting this Sunday, but it's all really boring, to be perfectly honest.
Well, I frankly find Polish politics more interesting than Canadian politics, but we'll talk about the politics stuff a bit later, I guess.
Fair enough.
Right, because your wife is Polish, correct?
She is, yes.
Nicholas? Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. Well, this is going to be. I think this will be a great discussion because we've got an American here, Canadian with a Polish wife, and then a Polak himself from Poland. So
That's
anyway,
right.
let's yeah, this should be good. Let's get right into it, and we're going to start with the topic of Jordan Peterson and well, just what came up, and I'll start with let's see how did this start. I don't know what the exact order of events was, but the first thing I saw of it was he was on the Joe Rogan podcast, and those are always really long and drawn out. But in there, he went on a spoof about there's a lot of people using Christ as king that are psychopaths that are just using it to gain power and to get followers and yada. And it's very drawn out. I was going to share a clip of the video, but he always takes so long to say anything that I figured it'd be just too long to share it on here. But the meat of it was he was basically just saying Christ is king is being used by a lot of psychopaths, and he was very much averting to Candace Owens. And I don't know what the two of your views on Candace Owens. I listened to some of her things, and they're very good, some of them, and but generally I don't like to listen to her. I just don't like her style. But yeah, she got out of the whole leftist. She was a leftist. She was the whole Black Lives Matter type of person. and then she got out of that. So she got out of that mindset, and then she, converted to Catholicism. It's in the Novus Ordo, but still, that's a life change. Um, but she's been very, very um, prominently talking about Christ as King, and using that as a banner, and that's why she got let go of the Daily Wire. Um, as that happened, I think, a year ago. But she was
I
at it again.
think she got fired because she was opposed to Israel massacring Palestinians.
Yes.
Or
Right.
perhaps
Yes.
because she was in favor of Palestinians massacring the Jews. It's difficult to tell.
Yeah. Well, whatever the reason was, I remember them talking about that, and Andrew Clavin, one of the other Daily Wire people, coming out and doing this whole thing about how Christ the King is anti-Semitic. It was so pathetic. But I wanted to share this Twitter thread here. Um, this I don't know if you can see that very well. Yeah, it says this is Jordan Peterson. Excuse me. He says Candace Owens, a true Pharisaical pretender. She vociferously proclaims her devotion to Christ for no other reason than to elevate her perceived status. Her outrage is designed not to shout the truth from the rooftops, build bridges, or make peace, but to subvert Christianity itself with its new force to her own purposes. She is literally using God's name in vain. There are few more unforgivable sins. And then he goes on, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You were like whitewashed tombs, beautiful on the outside, but inside they're full of dead men's bones and every kind of filth. And he
Isn't
goes on, he really rants
Yeah.
quite a bit.
isn't Jordan Peterson like not even? I don't know if he's an atheist, but isn't he like some kind of agnostic or doesn't even belong to
That's
any
I
congregation?
I strongly suspect he belongs to a congregation. It's just not a congregation he would brag about. As far as I can tell, he is a perfectly pious and orthodox believer in esoteric Christianity. He might be a Rosicrucian or a Martinist. It's just he believes in the occult version of Christianity.
And certainly
Well,
a liberal version of Christianity. Because the thing that struck me first of all is it seems like I don't know if it's a form of detraction or just, I mean, like rash judgment to be just going out there calling Candace Owens the Pharisee, saying she's only doing this for her own self-aggrandizement. I mean, I haven't seen any evidence of that. She's lost everything she had. Now, maybe she's been able to build up a new following, but she lost her prior career and job from some of the things she's stated. I mean, I don't know enough about her to know her personally to say why
I
she's
mean,
doing it, but
I mean, she certainly has a big following, and she's just a sponge. She takes in all the unpopular opinions, all the controversial opinions, whether they are sane or insane. She just collects them and she spews them to her audience because, well, let's face it, her entire career is built on being black. That's it. For whatever reason, American conservatives love to hear black people say conservative things, and gay people for whatever reason. That's how Milo got his popularity. That's how Candace Owens got her popularity. I remember even white nationalist channels some 10 years ago were inviting just, they found one black guy who was telling them that, yes, there are real differences in IQ, and they all, uh, and if I remember correctly, even the David Cole, the Jewish revisionist, got invited to white nationalist talk show on Red Ice TV. So her entire career is that, for whatever reason, conservatives have this deep-seated need for someone who doesn't share their lifestyle to share their views.
mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. There is something about that. I mean, in human nature, I think that especially when there are unpopular opinions to the narrative, we want to hear a black person or someone that fits a different, I guess, a different quota, you might say, or a different whatever. They don't fit in their niche where they should, and so a lot of people gravitate to that. And I think a lot of black people, especially young black people, really look up to her because they have been really used as tools by the left, and she's very very outspoken against it. Um, so I think a lot of people gravitated towards that, and partly she's just very outspoken. But I think I think you were very right about how she likes to adopt a lot of opinions that are very contrary and sane or insane. And I think the first time that Peterson really called her out on this that I saw was she was going on about the whole Macron's husband, that is his pretended wife, and she's done this massive long documentary proving, I haven't watched it, that Macron's wife is actually a man. And I listened to like 5 minutes of it, and I was like, I don't care enough. This is like hours long. I mean, it was like this deep investigation into it with all the photos and all. I mean, it was like intense. And the post I think on X that I saw was she said something about that, and then at the end of it said Christ is king. And it was like, what are you bringing that in here for? And I think there's a little bit of merit. Now, don't get me wrong. With Peterson, I really don't know what to think about him, because some of the things that he says are so good and so Catholic, like him talking about carrying your cross and other things are so good. And it's like, how is this guy not a Catholic with some of the things he says? And then on other things he says are like, what in the world? You missed the entire point. And I think there was value in what he was saying to some degree, because there are a lot of people out there that are morally reprehensible. I don't think Candace Owens is. I think she's doing as best she can, or as best she knows at the time. But I don't know. But there are a lot of people out there that just say Christ is king, but don't care at all about following Christ's commandments.
Andrew Tate is an excellent
Yes.
example. Who's a Muslim publicly, and of course he's a pimp and he's a male prostitute at times. And Candace Owens is his friend for whatever reason and defends him publicly.
But interestingly, Jordan Peterson's daughter is his friend too. I don't know what that's.
Well, I think he might have a vendetta against Andrew Tate but that's beside the point. Andrew Tate was saying Christ is king and he's Muslim, and I've seen people say, "Well, I don't even believe in God, but Christ is king." It's just
yeah. Well, it reminds me of that one. I think it was Dawkins recently who was saying, I think it was him. Some prominent atheist was saying in England,
yes, it was Dawkins.
I want to live in a Christian civilization. After decades of tearing down Christianity and God, he's now saying, "Oh, I don't want to live in a Muslim country. I want to live in a Christian country."
Well, I guess he finally realized how good Christian civilizations are. He just hasn't made the connection that the reason Christian civilizations are the way they are is because of the Christian faith and people embracing the Catholic faith.
Well, there's a very good quote from Margaret Thatcher about people like that. She said, let me find it. Yes, there are loyal supporters of the conservative cause today who would describe themselves as agnostic humanists. To my mind, such people are living recklessly on the dwindling spiritual capital of our Christian culture.
Yeah.
Good quote.
Yeah. You wouldn't have the world today without Christianity. I mean, it's falling apart now because Christianity has been removed from society. But...
Well, and exactly. That's why things are falling apart, because people even atheists look back longingly now at the 50s or the 60s even, or maybe further back, and it was so much nicer then. It was safe. You could walk down the street at night downtown without getting mugged, or various different things they point out. But that's because they were, the 50s and 60s, I think, were idealized. They weren't as good, as we think. But compared to today, they were fantastic because they were that much closer. They had that much of the Catholic heritage left in the tank back then, whereas now we're almost into full-on paganism.
Yeah. Well, and I think that the statement Christ is king, it can be, well, he is king and Lord of all because he is God. But if you just look at it from a natural standpoint, which I never do, but if you were to look at it as Peterson or others would, it's like Christ is king of everything. Like you look at civilization, it's so much better. Civilized Christian civilization is so much better. Compare the Hindu culture with their caste system to Christianity, Christian civilization. Compare the Muslim countries with all of the problems over there compared to a Christian civilization. There's no comparison. And there's no comparison at all. Um, but I, to what Peterson was saying, it is more popular now than it used to be. I mean, you even have Joe Rogan coming out now. I don't know if you saw this, but on a podcast, he was talking with a guy, and he was basically saying, I choose, the way he said it was something like Joe Rogan, this guy, I choose Jesus over the Big Bang Theory. Like I never would have thought that these guys would say things like that ever, because they were always so dismissive of anything to do with Christ or with God. And now things have shifted a little bit more culturally. It's a bit more popular. You get more views. It's a bit more safe now to say things like that.
Right.
So
But
there are more people that are going to be waving that flag, even though they don't believe it at all or don't live
and
up to it at all.
that is a valid concern, but I think they are also, I mean, they, quote unquote, I mean, the people like Jordan Peterson, but also people like this Network Contagion Research Institute. They're the ones that came out with this report saying that online extremists are hijacking the term Christ is king. I think that's where Jordan Peterson started getting this from. I think people like that are using the fact that some disreputable personalities are using the phrase to try to stop people from saying it and to try to paint everyone with the same brush, try to shut down this conversation because we don't want people even saying Christ is king. So I think there's usually the middle path is kind of where wisdom lies, right? So on the one hand,
For sure.
they're trying they want to say no one should be saying this at all because it's just anti-Semitic and you're crazy if you say it. But on the other hand, there are legitimate people that are, or people who legitimately we should not be listening to, or who are probably legitimately abusing the phrase or using it in a manner that it doesn't shouldn't be used. But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean we shouldn't be using it or we should be backing down at all from the defense of
Yeah.
the Christship or the kingship of Christ. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a good point to bring up. Like when you know, especially online with people, I bring this up probably too much. But if you're talking about Christ and Catholicism and all these other things, but you are acting like a psychopath, you're being very, very prideful and uncharitable and arrogant, and that's not promoting Christianity. That's not promoting the kingship of Christ at all. You're making a point. You might be proving yourself right, or you might be putting somebody down and owning them, but it's really not the example of Christ. I mean, Christ did say, "Learn of me because I'm meek and humble of heart." He did, yes, he did blast the Pharisees, but um, that's when it was needed and to protect others from their bad example. But I don't know. There's definitely a lot of people that are hurting Christianity, true Christianity, because of the way they come across. But maybe that's what Peterson was getting to. I'm not ready to write him off completely, but I don't trust him as a guide in faith. That's for sure. Some people do. It's like, he's talking about the most unforgivable sins, even though he's not. I mean, he's not a Catholic. He's not a Christian himself. So
Right.
it's
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
it's interesting.
I've always taken him as in he does say some really good things, and what he says is good. So all truth belongs to God. So I'll listen to the truth that he speaks, but always being cautious of anyone who was a tenured professor at a Marxist Canadian university and made a big career there. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and really anyone, I mean, as we'll talk about, Canada's just a liberal country, so you should be cautious of anyone probably coming from Canada. And I say that as someone who's born and raised here.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a perfect opportunity to go into our next topic, which is Canada and what's been going on up there. It, Nicholas, this is going to be your area. I'm obviously not a Canadian. I don't know much about it. I
Right.
know some people from Canada, but I'm going to kind of let you take over on this one. Just what's been going on. I know there's been the elections up there, and Polyev was expected to win, and he didn't. So if you could just kind of take it from here, I appreciate
Sure.
it.
Yeah, I can happy to give a little bit of rundown because I did speak with Kevin on Catholic Family Podcast a few months ago, and at that time I was saying Pierre Poilievre is certainly going to be the next Prime Minister of Canada, but I just put up the electoral map from the election just a couple weeks ago. When you look at it, you say, well, first of all, for American viewers, red is the Liberal Party, blue is the Conservative Party, so we're reversed.
Okay.
Frankly, to me, red makes more sense for the leftists, red communism. So this is the electoral map. And actually, you look at it, you can say, well, that looks like a lot of blue. But of course, it all comes down to the populations, right? And it's these Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver. You can't really see them on this map because they're so small on a giant map of Canada. But those are all deep red. And these big blue areas are all rural. So I think Canada has a bit of that rural-urban dichotomy that the U.S. has to an extent. But this map resulted in a bare minority government. So they don't have quite 50% plus one that they need for majority government. But the Orange people, that's the New Democratic Party, who basically the Communist Party of Canada, if they were honest, they call themselves that. They'll be propping up the Conservative Party. The light blue, that's the Bloc Québécois. They're the Quebec Separatist Party. They just do whatever is going to get Canada or get Quebec the most handouts. But yeah, so that's what we ended up with. So few factors that went into that. I think some people, they're outraged. How could this happen? Some people are talking vote fraud. In my view, there's no vote fraud at all. It makes sense if you just can sit down and think about Canada's demographics a bit. Keep in mind that baby boomers are 1/3 of the voting population in Canada. Wow. And I don't want to dump on them, but I mean, it's just the statistics show that they have, certain priorities that are different from people of different age groups. For some, they're a different stage of life, different background. But a big piece of it was Donald Trump, because to the American viewer, you might be thinking, oh, it's because Canadians are all snowflakes or whatever. But I mean, Canada has always been more kind of traditional, statist, like old school kind of conservative, in terms of like being in favor of the state. I mean, our version of it's like peace, order, and good government is our version of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So that's going way back, but that's kind of built into Canadian society, and just politeness, right? Everyone always jokes about Canadians are always apologizing and how polite they are. But I think to Canadians, a personality like Donald Trump is just completely anathema. Mm-hmm. So I think Canadians react even more negatively to Donald Trump. There's some Canadian conservatives who jumped on the Trump bandwagon just because he's had a lot of success. He's owned the left a lot. He's done some good things, but just the way he presents is just very off-putting to even very conservative Canadians. So when he then comes, like as he always does, like a bull in a china shop, and opens up this trade war, Canadians really took it, and credit to the Liberal Party of Canada. They played it to perfection to take full advantage of that and say, look, the United States is waging a trade war on us. They hate us. They want to destroy us. We're going to defend you. All of a sudden, the Liberal Party that had been telling us for 10 years that Canada is a post-national state, they all of a sudden became patriots. And they were able to tap into a subtle, like under the surface, hidden desire of Canadians to be patriotic and to have nationalism. So now all of a sudden, before Trump was elected, you're a racist and a horrible person if you're patriotic, if you're a nationalist. Now all of a sudden it was acceptable, and it was the Liberal Party of Canada that was waving that banner, and so a lot of people flocked to them. And
Yeah.
I could just
And
show a. Oh, sorry. I want, before I forget, go back to the my comments about baby boomers. So this is a graph of most important factors when deciding vote from polling that was done before the election. And so the red bar is baby boomers. The blue and green bars are I guess those would be millennials, Gen Z people. Gen X would be the yellow people like
wow.
me. So you can see reducing cost of living, or actually, sorry, that one they're kind of similar. It's the making housing more affordable. The third
Yeah.
bar
Yeah.
in making housing
The
more
people that have
affordable.
the people
The
that already
people,
have houses don't care about that issue.
right, and also making Canada a better place to live. Third from the left.
Mm-hmm.
The red bar,
Yeah.
they don't really care about that. But look at what does the baby boomer population care about? Dealing with Donald Trump. That's by far the highest. Sticking it to the bad orange man. That
Yeah.
was the prime motivator of 1/3 of our electorate. And then when you consider that something
Well,
obscene like almost 40% of our population are government employees now.
that's a really fantastic chart. I noticed the one on the farthest right was dealing with the debt, right? It's like that's a major issue up there, but dealing with Donald Trump is the biggest problem facing
Right.
Canada.
Yeah. Yeah. Because managing the federal budget and deficit, and keeping in mind that during the Trudeau years, the federal government amassed more debt than all the other governments in Canadian history combined. Because up until Trudeau, the Canadian government ran balanced budgets. So, which may seem strange to Americans because you've been running massive deficits for decades. But, well, I guess Harper's started into deficits because with 2008, the housing market collapsed and all. But all through the 90s and early 2000s, it was always balanced budgets. And that was political suicide to talk about running a deficit in Canada. Even the left was all through the 90s, the Liberal Party was in charge. I mean, I would take that Liberal Party over even today's Conservative Party any day. But
yeah, well, it's I think it's really unfortunate what happened uh, with how the left never lets a good crisis go to waste. That's one of their platform slogans, and the way that what Trump was saying was good for America because Americans were rallying behind him with these things, but it really influenced Canada. And I think I really hated the whole if Canada's going to be the 51st state thing. I really hated that. I thought it was really dumb, really stupid. And it's like Canadians, you should be patriotic. You should love your country and you should work for your country. They don't need to be part of our country. We've got enough to deal with over here. And I thought that whole 51st state thing was really just dumb. And I really didn't like it.
Well, and I think that really set people off even more than the tariffs. And I mean, it's also, I think it's kind of dumb from a perspective of if that actually happened and Canada, which has a similar population to California, was given similar congressional seats and electoral college seats to California, the Republicans would never win another election ever because, I mean, the Democratic Party is, well, they're, okay, I can't say they're to the right of the Conservatives anymore, but because they're pretty wacky these days. But I mean, Canadians would not vote Republican.
No.
Like some would, but the majority would vote Democrat if we were. Because if you compare even the Conservative Party, who are complete fake conservatives, I mean, even more so than the Republican Party. I don't even think they're real conservatives on a lot of issues. But I mean, that was the other. I don't think it helped Pierre Poilievre that he continued the Conservative Party of Canada tradition of many, many decades of, well, we're just liberal light. We basically have all the same policies as the Liberal Party, but we're not as annoying as Justin Trudeau. I mean, that was essentially his platform. And that's why when Trudeau resigned, that was another death blow to him, is the resignation of Trudeau combined with Donald Trump perceived attack on Canada. Those were two huge blows. I mean, Poilievre had almost nothing left after that because he had created his whole identity around I'm not Justin Trudeau.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it seems to me just how easily people can be deceived, because as an American looking in, we don't know it hardly. Most of us know nothing about Canadian politics, how it's run, and prime minister and parliament and all that other stuff, and we don't know like anything about Canada. I'm speaking for myself and most people I know. Obviously, not everybody, but we see these little snippets of Pierre Poilievre, however you say his name, owning a reporter. He's sitting there eating his apple and he's answering and he's putting this reporter on the spot. And that was like, yes, this guy's good. He's actually not afraid to speak and he's not afraid to say what he thinks. And to us, it's like, oh, another one like us, because that's one of the trademarks of the left is they say a lot without saying anything. And they talk around questions and they're always politically correct. And because they don't have the truth on their side. And contrary wise, if you have someone that's actually traditional or conservative more, um, they can actually say this truth and they stick to what they believe and they don't change it on a whim based on who they're talking to. Someone that is actually honest and true. So we see these little clippets of him in Parliament just owning Trudeau. We see him with reporters and other things, and we're like, yes, this is a good guy. He should be the one. He's traditional. He's conservative. And a 30-second reel doesn't tell you about a person or his policies. He's been in politics his whole life, hasn't he?
Yes, he's never done anything other than politics. He was straight out of university. He started working as a staffer at for the Conservative Party, and then he's been a member of Parliament for I forget how long, like almost 20 years, some of that. So that he has no actual life experience. And I mean, he does say some good things, and I mean, him owning people in Parliament. The problem is no one in Canada watches parliamentary debates. I mean, not any. I mean, some people do, but not enough. I think the problem is, at the end of the day, is, and this is probably similar in every liberal democracy, 80% of the population has no clue of what's going on in politics. They don't follow the issues. They don't follow anything. They just see what people are saying on the campaign trail and who has some good ads. And I think Pierre Poilievre really dropped the ball by. I think he didn't want to alienate parts of his base that like Donald Trump, but so he tried taking this. He didn't really say much about what was the situation with Trump in the 51st state, and I think that probably hurt him, because then people would say, well, look, Mark Carney, he's the one who's talking about this. But it also helps it with state-run media giving full support for the Liberal Party all the time. Because in Canada, we don't even have a Fox News. I mean, Fox News has lots of problems, but at least it's a different perspective. To consider Canadian media, think if all you had was three channels that were all exactly the same as CNN. That's Canadian.
So like CBS, CNN, and NBC.
Yeah, so we have CBC, which is literally state-run media. It's owned and operated by the government. So we have Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, which is CBC. We have Global and CTV, but they all have exactly the same views. So that's what the vast majority of Canadians, ones who get most of their information from legacy media, they're only hearing a pro-liberal position, and they're always hearing about how awful the Conservatives are. And I mean, it's funny because Pierre Poilievre, I think he's very mild and barely even conservative, but they still, go into hysterics about how awful he is and how right-wing he is, and he's an extremist. Well, maybe they don't call him an extremist. They don't go that far, but.
Well, I'm curious your thoughts on this. And Michael, I'm sorry, I'm just kind of leaving you out, but I know Nicholas is our one that knows the most here about this. The whole thing about the media not backing him or being against him. My question is, because I've heard other people talk about this, why didn't he go in on any of the big podcasts? Because so many of I don't know what it's like in Canada, but here, majority of people don't trust the media anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They listen to podcasts. They listen to Joe Rogan, or they listen to the Daily Wire, or they listen to all these other talking heads. I mean, Trump went on Rogan and he got like 60 million views in like 3 days, something crazy like that. And these people were inviting Poilievre to come on their show, and he refused to. He didn't come. That's what I heard anyway. I heard that from a couple very big podcasters.
That's been confirmed, that he was invited and that he declined. I'm not sure that he's ever given a reason why he declined. I suspect that it goes back to him not wanting to look extreme. And that's what the Conservative Party of Canada, part of the problem is they've always been terrified of the media. which I've always thought is foolish because they're going to call you Nazis anyway. So you might as well just say what you want to say rather than hiding and trying to pretend like we're more moderate or we're more liberal. So I think he probably thought that it would do more harm to him than good. Whether he's right or wrong about that, I don't know. I think that trust in legacy media is waning in Canada, but not to the same extent as in the United States. Yeah. So and especially like demographics, like baby boomers, probably Gen X as well, are probably still very heavily invested in legacy media. There still seems to be a bit of naive trust. I think Canadians have, that's a bit of, I talk about their trust in, peace, order, and good government. There's a bit of a trust of authority built into that, versus I think American culture has a bit of more skepticism of authority built in with the revolutionary background.
Come on.
Right. So, which is good in this era, but I mean, in a more normal situation, I personally think the Canadian respect for authority is probably, if you had a Catholic government, would be better, because rebels would probably be rebelling against a Catholic government too.
No, 100%. Yeah, you're right. I want to share this one question here from Dan Davis. He said, Nicholas, do you think there's a rock bottom in Canada where you shake yourselves and start returning to more conservative values? I wanted to get your take on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't know anymore. At one point I would have said I thought we were there in the fall of last year, with the housing prices are absolutely out of control. Cost of living is out of control. People are using food banks in like unheard of numbers. I thought we were getting close to that, and it looked like the Conservative Party thing. Not just the Conservative Party, just generally. But I don't know. Now it seems like everyone's they're doubling down on the statism. Unfortunately, I think when you get to the point where the state actually starts falling apart and it starts becoming more like a third world socialist country rather than a first world socialist country, because for now things are in the process of falling apart, but a lot of things still work enough that people can, I think, maintain their faith in this system. Unfortunately, I think things need to get worse, because Canadians, probably more than any other culture in the world, I think we've had it the easiest, the longest of anyone. I mean, we've never had any major war on our land, really. I mean, the War of 1812 was really a series of skirmishes. It wasn't. I mean, that's the only time we've had foreign troops on Canadian soil. But I mean, other than that, we've had no wars. We've had, I mean, the Great Depression is the worst, economic or type of calamity we've ever had. We don't really have natural disasters here. I mean, it gets really, really cold in the winter, but other than that, I'll take the cold rather than the earthquakes and the hurricanes and the tsunamis. But I think that Canadians are so comfortable, and they've been so comfortable for so long, that things will have to get worse. But I'm sure there's a point for in any culture where things just get bad enough that people start saying, hey, this hasn't been working, maybe we need to start looking at something else. But I guess the other thing is the other problem Canada has is Canada's much more secular than the United States. And I think that's because at the time of Vatican II, Canada had a much higher percentage of its population that was Catholic than the United States. So therefore, Canada's had a bit of the Europe effect, where we've gone way worse than the United States, because Protestantism, although a vile heresy, I think it actually helped keep the United States, well, in recent years anyway. I mean, it's weird. If I think back to the 80s when I was growing up, in the 80s, Canada was much more conservative than the United States, and we all considered the United States this weird liberal country. Since the 1980s, Canada's gone further left, and the United States, I think, has gone a bit more conservative than at that time.
Well, it's interesting what is portrayed, because what you see on TV and movies and Hollywood and media does not represent the rest of the people. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what that's like in Canada, but here it's like, it's the majority of the country is not Christian in the sense that they're true Catholics, but they go to church, they read their Bibles. Yes, they think they can get married 3 times or 5 times or whatever. So they're confused in a lot of areas, but it's the places that have been the most Protestant that have been more conservative, because they didn't jump on the Vatican II train and ecumenism and all that other stuff. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think culturally, yeah, the 80s and 90s were a lot more godless. But as like we were talking about earlier, Christian civilization is better, and it makes people happier and more fulfilled and purpose and all that other stuff. And the godless secular lifestyle, it just brings misery from one generation to another. It gets worse.
Hmm.
Anyway, that's a bit of a tangent, but what I don't want to stay on this too much longer. But what's a new prime minister? What's his name again?
Mark Carney.
Mark Carney. Yeah, he's a globalist, right? I mean, he's
Major
just
globalist. I mean, he was the
major
governor of the Bank
globalist.
of he was the governor of the Bank of Canada, and then he was the governor of the Bank of England, and then he came back to
Oh,
Canada.
wow.
So, I mean, when you that tells you all you need to know about him, about how global. I don't think gets much more globalist than being the governor of the Bank of England.
Yeah, yeah. It always makes me laugh. It makes me laugh. The whole, you go from globalism is the thing, and we're all part of one world and all that other stuff. And then you get red man or orange man coming in here saying you should be the 51st state. No, elbows up. We're gonna fight you. We're gonna fight you, and we're gonna elect a globalist. And while we're claiming that we want to be strong nationalists,
Yeah, yeah.
there's
And
a lot of mixed signals.
yeah, unfortunately, I think Carney also benefited from the fact that no one knows who he is in Canada because he hasn't lived here in decades. So he just showed up. We had this super short, it was only 3 weeks campaign. I think if the campaign had been another 2-3 weeks longer, people would have gotten to know Carney a bit better, and the Liberals probably would have lost the election. But they credit to them from a purely pragmatic political perspective. I mean, they played it all to perfection. They took advantage of the crisis. They timed everything exactly right to pick their new leader, then call an election immediately, make it a really short election period so that people don't have time to figure out who this guy is, and used all the media to their advantage. So they
Sounds
played
like
it.
Obama
Mm-hmm.
in a way. Yeah, but yeah, they're wise as serpents, that's for sure. Yeah, I've listened to some people talk about his ties to the Chinese Communist Party, and how heavily. I mean, China has been so involved in America's interests in business and politics, and it seems like even more so in Canada.
Oh, yeah. Well, the Chinese Communist Party, according to our intelligence agency, has something like 30 of our members of parliament on their payroll, and they actively pay them. But nothing's ever been released because this came out because a whistleblower from within, it's called CSIS, the Canadian Security and Intelligence Service, basically our version of the NSA and the CIA combined into one agency. Someone leaked this because they were sitting on it because the government didn't want this released. So it was leaked that, I'd have to look it up. I think it's around 30, and we have about 360 or something members of parliament. So it's still significant. I mean, it's almost 10%.
Yeah, it's 10%, and they're influencing other people. It's not just
yeah, and but this has just never been released. They've never released the names of these people. Like, for all we know, they're probably still sitting members of parliament. And note that neither side has released this information. Yeah. Do people really vote based on issues? Yeah, well, that's a good point too. I think the vast majority of people don't vote on issues. I personally don't think human beings generally are equipped to handle democracy. That's why it was always, in all the Catholic history, it was always monarchies. I mean, you had the Italian republics, but those were a disaster.
Well,
for the same reasons. I mean, crime and assassinations and constant rebellions.
Yes, well, but they produce very nice art.
Well,
Well, Switzerland, which had centuries of peace and brotherly love, what have they produced? The cuckoo clock.
Yeah, well,
and we, of course,
good watches.
Yes, well.
Wow.
And we, of course, had the very big Catholic Republic in the Republic of Venice, and we of course had the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which was also a republic. So,
Well, it's an elective monarchy. I don't know. I wouldn't
well,
say
it was a republic in practice. The king was powerless.
right, and that's exactly why Poland ceased to exist for centuries.
No, not at all. It
Uh-oh,
ceased to
uh-oh.
exist for a completely different reason.
Oh, we can have that debate another time because I think that's. But we should have that debate. I'll reread,
Absolutely.
That sounds like
on the history of that, and we can debate. But Poland has a fascinating history too. It needs more airtime.
that'd be a very interesting discussion. I'd love to hear more about that for sure. Um, well, I mean, the whole point of democracy is people vote in their own best interests. What's best for them? It might be short term, it might be long term, and I think the graph that you shared perfectly embodies that. You had the baby boomers, they were fine about housing and this and that because they were set. They're already set. They're not the young college students that can barely make ends meet and can't afford anything. Um, so of course they're going to vote. If you're comfortable and the government is paying for everything, then you're going to, you're fine. You're good with the status quo. Why would you shake it up and put everything you own in jeopardy in your lifestyle, etc.? But anyway, there's one last comment I wanted to share here from Mandy, that Mark Carney sounded smooth and polished, exact opposite of Trump. I think that's very, very true.
Yeah, I mean, Mark Carney was definitely the way he presented that's the type of politician Canadians love. Very moderate, reasonable, calm, professional, polite. Like, I mean, that's what Canadians. I mean, even Pierre Poilievre gets, because he has these viral videos where he owns the left. Like, Canadians don't like that because that's not. That's not the Canadian way. That's a little bit too confrontational.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's certainly not the way I was hoping it would go, but I mean, it is, I guess, to be expected.
I mean, I'm not upset because really, it would have made no real difference. The only topic that there was a significant difference between the two is firearms laws. So yes, now that we're most likely going to have all firearms illegal soon, and whether they'll be confiscated by the police, I don't know or they're just going to grandfather it in. But I'm confident they're going to outlaw everything. Whereas the Conservatives would have rolled back the insane firearms policies of Liberals, but other than that, no real difference. So I'm not really that upset.
Yeah. I mean, can you practically ban firearms in Canada? A lot of the country is rural. Don't you have bears and some such?
We do, and there are areas where people actually have to carry firearms because they could be attacked by a bear. What they'll probably do is just carve out very limited exceptions for them. So, for example, you're not allowed to open carry in Canada, but people who live in those specific areas, they can get a special permission to open carry, because obviously if a bear runs up on you, you're not going to be able to unlock your rifle box and pull it out. They might have some limited exceptions for people in these remote areas. I'm not, but for anyone, for all intents and purposes, they've already outlawed almost everything at this point. Handguns are functionally illegal at this point. You can't buy them, you can't transfer them, they can't leave your safe. So, I mean, and then basically any firearm worth owning in terms of shotguns and long rifles, they're pretty much all prohibited, and they're all grandfathered, but they can't leave the safe. So what's the point even?
Well, how bad is the crime in Canada? I mean, I know like in England it's horrible.
Well, it's getting worse. It's getting worse. It's getting a lot worse. It wasn't that bad. I mean, Canada historically has had quite low crime rates. But actually, I can show you a graph that really demonstrates how our crime rate has gone up as our firearms laws got more draconian or bad for the people. So you can see on this chart the orange bar. That's our homicide rate.
Mm-hmm.
and then the blue I think is handgun homicides, and yellow is gang homicides. Anyway, you can, they have these, like, when the federal long gun registry was gotten rid of by Stephen Harper in 2012, crime actually went down. But then 2015 is when Justin Trudeau is elected, and you see mandatory gang minimums were repealed. Well, you can see you got the Harper Conservatives, the blue background, red background, Trudeau Liberals. So you see crime was starting to go up. It really starts going up when the mandatory minimum jail sentences for gangs are repealed. But then you see, as these firearm bans start happening, of note, the May 2020 OIC gun ban, that's Order in Council. That's the Canadian version of an executive order. So essentially, in May 2020, Justin Trudeau issued an executive order, banning AR-15s and anything that's similar to an AR-15, anything that's black and has a detachable magazine and semi-automatic, essentially. And so anyway, you can see it's going up. Like, it was in 2009, our crime rates were quite low. They've doubled, at least. I mean, this is homicide, but everything's gone up at about the similar pace to homicide. So you can see how crime rates have at least doubled or more than doubled since their low point in 2013, which was right near the end of Prime Minister Harper's Conservative government, and it's gone up significantly.
I'm tired of hearing people say follow the science and not being able to follow data like this. I mean, if criminals don't follow the law, so if they're going to rob, if they're going to kill, they're not going to care about what the law says about carrying guns. It's just so basic. It's so simple.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating to hear all this. We got to protect people. Take away your guns so that you're helpless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as the saying goes, it's as true in Canada as anywhere else. When seconds count, the police are only minutes away.
Yeah, right.
Maybe even more so in Canada, because our population density is much lower than the United States. Certainly much lower than Europe.
Mm-hmm. Michael, I'm curious your thoughts on this, because a lot of Europeans I've talked to have very different views than Americans on gun ownership and such.
Probably my views are very American. I think guns should be freely available. Yeah. And they are necessary means of self-defense. If people have the right to live, they have, by that right, a right to means of preserving their lives. Mm-hmm. So they have to be allowed weapons.
Yeah. It's so simple. I mean,
and I mean, another perspective I consider is, like, back in the Middle Ages, it was mandatory in England. It was mandatory for men to own bows and practice with them weekly. And I think that's the difference between a country where, I'm trying to think of how to word it, but where your government or your rulers actually like their own people, or actually consider themselves among their own people and want their country to be difficult to defeat in a war, versus our modern countries where, I mean, I think Tucker Carlson made a good example of this. Now, if you want to know whether our rulers hate us or not, if parents locked their child in the basement, didn't feed him, you'd say they hate that child. Well, by the same token, I'd say a lot of things that our governments do show that they hate their own people, or they aren't their own people. And so, I mean, look, the United States could never, ever, ever be defeated or occupied in a war, because so many of the citizens own firearms. Like, it just couldn't happen. Whereas a completely disarmed country would be much easier to conquer.
Yeah. I think I saw some data one time that the largest standing army in the world would be all the deer hunters in Minnesota. One state. That's not talking about all the other 49 other states. I mean, Americans love their guns. And like you said, that's why Switzerland wasn't invaded, right? Because, I mean, they were neutral, yes, but they also had, they had requirements during World War II, right, that they had to train, and they had to have firearms, I think.
I think they still has that.
Still do.
I think all males over the age of 20 are mandatory members of the militia there, and they have like state-issued firearms locked up in their homes, and they have to do training. I'd be in favor of that. To me, that's I'd like to see
It makes sense.
every country having something like that, where every
Well,
man has to have some. Well, maybe not every, but if you had Catholic country, if I was running a country, a Catholic monarchy, that's the way I'd run it.
Well, it's like you said, if your government actually cares about your people, you're going to care about their protection and their
Mm-hmm.
safety and their well-being. Instead, like in our country, the last administration let in 20 million illegals over the southern border. Great. That's without vetting them, without caring about them, and then they want to say they want to, you know,
Well,
take away people's ability to defend themselves, etc.
that probably segues us nicely into the topic of Bob from Chicago, because
Bob of Chicago.
I think he, like his predecessor, has had strong words for people who and the people who call themselves, who are members of their sect, like Vice President Vance, and saying that he's not a good Catholic because he wants to stop illegal immigration, which even from
Yeah.
a Nova Scotia perspective seems insane to me. But because, I mean, isn't the law the law? But these are criminals. But but I know I've read stuff saying that Bob Prevost is, or Prevost, I suppose is how it might be pronounced in the United States, but it's a French name, so I think it'd be Prevost. He's right in there with all this immigration stuff, and saying that illegal immigrants have all these rights and they should be let in.
Yeah. Yeah, Bob of Chicago. I totally agree with you. That's something that's in the U.S. There's a lot of Protestants that are really, Protestant conservatives that are MAGA, all about Trump and all about very conservative, and they're looking at these Catholic, quote unquote, Catholic leaders, and are just utterly disgusted, especially with the illegal immigration stuff, because that was one of the biggest voting issues in our country at our last election, was the unchecked immigration. And it was very widespread. I think we talked about it on this channel, how the U.S. bishops condemned Vance and Trump and what they're doing with illegals and all that other stuff. And it's got a lot of Protestants being like, these crazy, evil, bad Catholics. We don't need a pope, we don't need a church. They've gone down the wrong path. But yeah, I think Bob of Chicago is going to be very much following in Francis's footsteps with this. Michael, I've not let you talk very much here. What are your thoughts on Bob of Chicago and what's happened since his election? Because I don't think any of us really knew who he was before.
I didn't. Well, I'm certainly more annoyed than I thought about his name choice.
Agreed.
I don't like, because it brings back all the people who think themselves great fans of Leo the 13th and the Catholic social teaching. And now, a few times a day, I see someone calling, "Oh, well, did you know that socialism and capitalism were both condemned, and now the third road?" And it annoys me very much. I have to correct all that. And so I think this will be something that we'll have to deal with. And of course, because he came back dressed nicely, and people showed those photos of JP2, of Ratzinger, and Bergoglio, and now Provost. He's less obvious about being a modernist, but it really shows that people don't care about anything deep. They want. I think this has happened increasingly in the last few years with this new generation Z. They don't care about ideology. They don't care about doctrine. They will make it all up in their own head. They care about gestures, about aesthetics. They want him to. We saw it when Bergoglio allegedly said that there is too much faggotry in the seminaries, and they were ecstatic. They thought he's now a great traditionalist. He's one of us secretly. Just like before that, the same people believe that Taylor Swift, the singer, is secretly a neo-Nazi.
I've never heard that one before.
Oh yes, they were convinced that she's again one of them because she's secretly sending them messages
Oh my
in her
gosh.
songs.
Wow.
We really are having a delusional generation, and
Well,
people who at first joke that, oh, the new pope is based and red pilled or whatever, and then they slowly forget that they were joking and they actually start to believe it.
well, I wouldn't be. I don't know if I would single out Gen Z necessarily, because I mean this focus on externals has been going on for decades. I mean the whole reason that the Fraternity of Saint Peter and the Institute of Christ the King Sovereign Priest and groups like that even exist is because of people, in my view. Some might say this is unfair, but I mean if you're accepting Vatican II, like you might, but going to them, like it's the aesthetics. And I mean I remember when Ratzinger was elected, oh, he's wearing red slippers and he plays Beethoven on his piano. We're back, the Catholic Church is back, Abemus Papam. And so I mean this stuff has been going on for I think it goes back to with I think just
Yes,
all in human nature. Humans are
that
just generally,
I think is as
they're
old
really
as
shaped to
time.
be shepherd.
Yes, I'm specifically referring to how Gen Z does it. This really schizophrenic notion that people are actually, those single events are actually sending them messages
Oh,
of
right.
secret allegiances. That's
I,
of course.
I think it's a coping mechanism because again, like people you can find all the way back. Oh, Paul VI, he actually died and was replaced with some imposter.
Yes.
There's the true pope, or like some of them say, oh, these
I
guys are
mean,
secretly in favor.
there's obviously nothing new under the sun. It's just, I think Gen Z is especially prone to this because they were locked up for.
Oh,
We
probably.
we won't mention for what they were locked up, but
And
they were
social
COVID.
media.
I'll
I think
mention it.
social media amplifies all this stuff.
right. And
People in previous generations didn't have that cesspool
yes,
to
the
have all that.
people, this generation is cut off from a lot of human contact, so
Mhm.
they just make up a new reality in their head.
Yeah.
And of course, this really does seem like a repeat of Ratzinger, because we are going to, and Ratzinger really was. Someone told me, oh, that he's the new Saint Thomas, and his work are the new Summa Theologica, Ratzinger. But of course, it sort of makes sense because they do need the new one because they can't stand the old one. But he was a theologian for Philistines, something that you pick up and you open it and you read and you feel really profound. It doesn't change anything. You don't really get anything sensible from it. I remember um, him writing about resurrection, that, oh no, it wasn't just bringing back a dead body to life. That wouldn't be profound enough. It was a beginning of a new life, but not a biological life, but a new life, which is unlike all life. But he goes like that, and that's why I
can't
compare.
stand modernist writings.
Yes, and he talks like that about Christ's descent into hell. Uh, he never does anything specific. That's why I was comparing him to Richard Wagner, because Wagner's music was famous for, well, normally music has a beginning and then it builds up and it reaches a point and then it comes down. Wagner didn't. He starts bombastically and then builds up and then builds up and then builds up and then they stop playing. And this is Ratzinger, his theology. He Well, we can't have dead body coming back to life. That's not profound enough. So it's more profound, just wonder, new life, new quality. And then he just stops the chapter and moves on to the next subject. He doesn't reach any conclusion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to go back a little and just comment on what you said about Gen Z and such, and how they're perceiving this. Personally, my reaction, my interactions with people here, anyway, has been the younger millennials and Gen Z are much more looking at truth and reality that I've met, anyway. I'm not talking about online because online you get a mix of everything and anyone in between, and the loudest voices prevail. It's to me, it's the older ones that seem more caught up in the emotion and the appearances, because I think they were the ones that were most introduced to it, and the lack of substance through the 70s, 80s, 90s, and then the next generation or two has been scrabbling and scraping for truth and for reality and for reason. That's not the mainstream, obviously, but I've met more younger people that are more interested in sorting through all of that stuff than the older. And that's just my thought on that. I wanted to say that before I forget it, but I want to. I think what you're bringing up, Ratzinger. I think Bob is going to be Ratzinger mixed with Francis. I think the externals of Ratzinger, but the mindset in the modus operandi of Francis. I think that's going to be what we're
Yeah.
going to see in this guy.
Yeah, I mean, that may be. I just don't know enough about him. I just know from looking at the externals. I mean, just because Francis or Bergoglio was so quote unquote humble, that's why people are taking note. But I mean, he's not aesthetically to the extent of Ratzinger, because I watched a clip of his first mass, and that could have been any Novus Ordo mass anywhere. Like he was just wearing the typical, very plain Novus Ordo chasuble. I think I had like one stripe on it. Otherwise, just plain white material. He just had regular black shoes on. So,
Well,
and it's so
that's
casual too. The Novus
right.
Ordo is so casual and pedestrian.
That's sort of what I was talking about. With Ratzinger, they had to have this whole show to get into the delusion that he was this traditional Latin Mass Pope.
Hmm.
With this one, he just has to speak a few words of Latin and they believe it.
Yeah.
With JP2, he had to go on a pilgrimage. He had to come out of the plane and get on his knees and kiss the ground, and then they were ecstatic that he's a great pope. With this one, again, he sings to the square of Saint Peter, and that's it. They are already in love with him.
I mean, that's a commentary on how far gone things are, and that's kind of the scary thing, is that so-called conservatives, they're always shifting. That's why I don't consider myself a conservative, because I'm just Catholic, because Catholic is unchanging, so you have the same standards. But conservatism, it keeps shifting to the point that now they're things that, I mean, like if Prevo came out in the 60s, probably he would have had way more sedevacant contests, because everyone was saying this guy's crazy. But now he actually looks kind of good because we just had Bergoglio.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so many people talk about how wonderful and pious John Paul II was. I mean, but he was unbelievable. The things he did around the
Mm-hmm.
world with all the different religions, pagan religions. But they saw him holding a rosary and talking
Yeah.
piously of Blessed Virgin Mary, so they thought he was this wonderful, amazing, amazing holy man.
I mean, I don't think even Bergoglio kissed the Quran, did he? I think only
I
Wojtyla
don't.
did
I've
that.
never seen it, but I mean, yeah. Well, here's something I wanted to share on this. It's a quote of um, Bob, commented on by oh shoot, commented on by oh, sorry, commented on by Matt from our good friend there. Let me see if I can get this. Oh, all right. Sorry, I'm messing up the screen sharing thing here. Um, why is this not sharing properly? I'm sorry, everybody. Please be patient with me. There we go. Okay. All right, so this is the quote from Bob is we have to know how to listen, not to judge, not to shut doors, as if we hold all the truth and no one else has anything to offer. Oh boy, that really gets my modernist sense spiking here. This is Matt's response or his post on it. Ecumenism on steroids. Compare this message to that of Pope Pius XII. One should not speak of this reunion in such a way that they will imagine that in returning to the church, they are bringing to it something substantial, which it has hitherto lacked. So you have Pope Pius XII talking about this, and other popes, obviously, talking about how if we're going to get together, if we're going to have meetings, this is a direct reference Pope Pius XI made in one of his encyclicals, that if we're going to have meetings to encourage unity, it's to bring people back to Catholicism, not to get them to share with us. Okay, that's kind of like you're saying with conservatives. You just go a little bit slower than everybody else, and we'll take a little bit from here, a little bit from there, and we'll just kind of move along with things. That's how the modernist church does it. That's how the drive of modernist ecumenism is. Let's share and make each other better. Whereas the Catholic Church teaches that no, they need to come back to the one true church established by Christ that has all truth, that doesn't have any mixture of error, which they have. And this is what Bob is saying here. Do not shut doors as if we hold all the truth and no one else has anything to offer. And that, in a nutshell, is this nice speaking, polished modernism that sounds nice, but it contains in it a contradiction of true Catholic teaching. And I just would like to get any of your comments on that quote that he had to say here. Anything off the top of your head? I mean, it's pretty obvious.
It's just sort of standard modernism. I mean, the quote, when applied to spiritual matters, to religious matters, is of course puts Catholicism on the level with all other religions, and we have to learn from each other. But even if it were spoken about something natural, even then it is suspect, because even in natural matters, when we learn from one another, well, we do it precisely to judge. We discern, we judge who brings good ideas and who brings bad. But of course, well, obviously he's talking about spiritual matters. And
yeah, and I think the other aspect of that is, of course, he's bringing up again how we should not judge, right? And that harkens back to Jorge Bergoglio's "Who Am I to Judge?" which, Father, I'm sure you would know this. I mean, it seems like the "Judge not lest you be judged" is the most abused passage in the Bible, and like it. Do not judge means you should just tolerate evil and that there's no objective truth, which is absolutely not what "do not judge lest you be judged" means.
Well, I mean, God is the final judge, of course, but we have a brain, we have a reason, not a brain. We have our intellect to judge between what is right and what is wrong, what is true and what is false. That's why God gave us a conscience. It's one of the reasons He gave us an intellect to be able to discern what is right from wrong. We are constantly making judgments. We have to. I mean, is this book behind me? Is it red or is it blue? Don't judge. Don't try to speak truth here. You can't have truth unless you're judging. That's why God gave it to us. But condemning people, sure, that's one thing. Condemning, not being kind and charitable or humble, sure, we have to do that. But the way it's misused is extremely frustrating.
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, I mean, because you think there's the oft quoted phrase, hate the sin, love the sinner. They seem to take, you have to love the sin and the sinner, or they can't differentiate between saying like, well, look, what that person is doing is objectively evil, so I reject what they're doing, or I even condemn that act, but that doesn't mean I hate that person. And really, right. I mean, I don't think it's not even a true love to be tolerating evil, because evil is, they're going to go to hell if they die in mortal sin without repenting. But also in this world, generally evil things are harmful to people.
Yeah. encouraging or confirming someone in their sin is actually is the greatest sign of hatred for that person. Not
Hmm.
love,
Of course.
hatred.
There, of course, are good reasons to tolerate some evil, namely to avoid a greater one,
Hmm.
but it's not done for its own sake.
Yeah.
It's one thing to say that, we shouldn't, I don't know, lock all the sinners in prisons.
Well,
Or
because then
They
everyone
won't
would
be
be in
there.
prison.
right. And it's quite another to say that we have no ability to. It's not to say that we have to tolerate every sin. There are some which we, in society, for practical reasons, have to. There are others which I think no one really wants to tolerate every sin. It's just this liberal notion that in case of every controversy, just say, well, do what you want, I'll do what I want.
Well, I think you've touched on something important there, saying that like no one really wants to tolerate everything. It's really, if you look at it, it's just to undermine the Catholic faith. Because I mean, liberals are some of the least tolerant people you'll ever meet.
Absolutely.
Modern liberals, right? Like, and they'll say these things like, "Well, it's one thing to have difference of opinion, but I can't." You can't have differences of human values. I forget the terminology. So
Something
when
like
they're
that.
not going to be they're not going to talk to you ever again because they just found out that you're a traditional Catholic or something. So I think pretty much everyone agrees with the principle that you can't tolerate everything. It's just what do you tolerate, and so it's generally things blasphemies against God, sodomy, like a lot of the sins that cry to heaven for vengeance. Those you have to tolerate. Those you can't judge, but we can judge you all day and all night for you because you're a misogynist or you're racist or what
Or
have you.
because you think that helping the poor doesn't mean giving more money to the government. That's
Right.
inhuman.
Yeah.
Well, it shows you. I mean, it's a religion of the world. The Vatican II religion is a religion of the world. Yes, as you're saying, no one tolerates everything. Like Francis, for example, Bergoglio. I mean, the real sinners in the world were the traditionalists, people that were
Hmm.
rigid. He didn't tolerate that. As you said, the leftists are very intolerant.
And the Italian mafia. I think
And the
he
Italian
didn't like the mafia.
Yes.
Yes, I think he said that they will go to hell.
No,
And Novus
but he
Ordo
said hell doesn't.
Catechist told me
But he
that.
said hell doesn't
Oh,
exist at another place,
Well, he
and that
wasn't very
souls disappear if
consistent.
they don't go
He
to heaven.
wasn't very
well,
consistent.
yeah, you'll hear them say hell doesn't exist, but then it suddenly exists if the topic ever comes to
For Hitler and for us.
Catholics or Nazis or I mean basically
Yeah.
hell's empty except for Archbishop Lefebvre, Archbishop Tuke, Sedevacantis, and Nazis and Hitler
And the Italian mafia.
Yeah. Well, guys, never fear, because Bob said when he was a cardinal, a bishop is not called to reinvent the gospel, but to guard and transmit it whole and entire. So, as this person on Twitter says, unfollow anyone blackpilling right now, because this guy, when he was a cardinal, said one thing, that we have to, transmit the gospel whole and entire.
I think I commented on that quote or something very
Okay.
much like that.
I mean, if he lived according to that quote, then maybe I'd be starting to think, hey, maybe the thesis of Cassisiacum is correct if they elect a man who actually implemented that in his. But we know he doesn't. We know anything about him. We've seen enough evidence that he doesn't.
Well, let's leave the thesis out of it for a while. But I commented on that quote or on quote like that it is something which absolutely every priest of every denomination and every wandering charlatan can say in his sleep. This is probably anyone can say that, and we are here supposed to be in awe of saying, well, you should live by the gospel. Well, every Protestant will tell you that.
Mhm.
Every Catholic will tell you that. Every Orthodox will tell you that. Every snake charmer will tell you that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I want actions speak louder than words, or I want to say facta non verba. what do I want to see here out of this? And
Well,
this is just words.
Well, and not only that, it's consistency. And this is what Pope Pius XII blasted the modernists for in his encyclical, saying how they will say one thing from the pulpit and the next day completely contradict it. They'll say one thing to sound like they're pious in a letter, but then the next day they say something that's the rationalists would say. It's like there's consistency with truth, but when you believe that truth is relative, as the modernists do, then the truth changes as you see fit. It's all based on your perception and who you're speaking to. And that's trademark modernism. And you're seeing that right off the bat with this guy. Um, and it's more polished than Francis. It makes people feel better because some of the things he says are better than what Francis would say. But there's also these pretty blatant, very blatant contradictions of what the Catholic Church teaches. And here's one other quote I wanted to share that the tradition Kevin reposted here. I don't know if you can see that very well. I can see it, but
Yeah, I can see it fine.
yeah. Okay, so this is from Bob's. And when I'm saying Bob, people that are listening, I'm not meaning to diminish the papacy. I don't believe this man is a pope, and I'm going to call him Bob because I don't believe he is Pope Leo. But that's my truth. If we got any modernists on here, okay. But he says here, the Holy See is willing to help enemies meet, so they may look each other in the eye, and so people may be given back the dignity they deserve, the dignity of peace. With heart in hand, I say to the leaders of nations, let us meet, let us dialogue, let us negotiate. And on a political level, that's good. That's fine. I mean, I'm sure Pope Pius XII said very similar things during World War II, but I don't know. There's just always an element here. And Kevin commented, "Let us meet, let us embrace the one true faith given us by Christ." I mean, this is one of those. I guess you could take one side or another on what he's getting at here, because there is a lot of war, there's a lot of controversy, there's a lot of conflict.
Yes,
So
didn't like his speech. That I think he said that war is never inevitable, and there should be no more war. Well, that's unfortunately nonsense. War is inevitable. That's why, and when we try to create a world without war, we are always creating. I mean, in a sense, he is correct. We can always avoid it. We can just replace it with wanton slaughter without any principles. That's the alternative to war.
I mean, to anyone to say that war is never inevitable, I wondered, have they ever read the Bible? Because I mean, you read the Bible. If you start in Genesis and just read forward, I mean, it's ever since the fall, it's been nonstop war. I mean, that doesn't mean war is good, but that's fallen human nature. It's going to happen. So
sometimes necessary. Yeah.
I mean, we are in modern world very easily avoiding war. It's not war. It's just peacekeeping operation. It's a military conflict. It's
special
military intervention, right? Special military. And the thing is, when you are fighting a war, you have to issue an ultimatum. You have to declare it, and so on. There are no such rules for special military operations.
Mm-hmm.
You can do whatever you like.
Yeah, or what I don't know. What's Israel calling whatever the
yeah.
When I say whatever they're doing, it's pretty clearly a genocide. What are they calling it though? I haven't kept up on their terminology.
Yeah, I mean, they might be calling it a genocide, to be perfectly honest.
Well, behind closed doors, publicly, of course, you're an anti-Semite if you suggest that. But
yeah,
I'm going to be very controversial and say that I think because the whole Palestinian conflict is one with no heroes. The Palestinians are really. I mean, I can understand that they are the injured party, but they are not exactly sympathetic heroes. But I think Jews should enslave the Palestinians. Then we could at least, well, they would have no reason to kill them if they enslaved them, right? They wouldn't be killing them if they worked for them. And at least we could buy some of the Palestinians back if we wanted to buy them out of slavery.
Well, you weren't.
I mean, that's
It wasn't
That's
false advertising when you said you were going to say a controversial opinion.
but look at what Louis de Molina, the theologian, says in his treatise on slavery. He says precisely that the slavery of war captives was introduced to save their lives, because then they become valuable and they can be bought back by their friends. So that is the point of slavery. That's why it existed. So the captives of war will not be exterminated, but will be put to work and perhaps later will regain their freedom.
Yeah, but we're in such a different world. You don't need slaves to do the washing because you have washing machines. You don't need,
Well,
it's a completely different world. So I don't
yes,
see
but
how that's, I don't
perhaps
think
we
that's
need
relevant.
them to save their lives.
Well, I
I mean,
mean,
very obviously, what are Jews going to do? They are going to keep killing the Palestinians.
well, I think the Jews, because or the Israelis, they're allowed to have an ethno state. So I think they just want their pure ethno state, and they want to ship. They'll eventually ship everyone out of Gaza so they can help further de-Christianize our countries.
Yes, but it's going to backfire on them, because ethno states have a nasty tendency to collapse. Every ethno state, we look at what happened to South Africa, to Rhodesia, to
Hmm.
in America, the southern
Well,
slaveholding states.
I suppose it depends.
They were all destroyed by ethno states.
Well, it depends on
Look
what you mean by ethno state. I mean, I would consider Poland essentially a white ethno state. I mean, it's like 99%
now,
Polish people who live there.
and it's going to collapse precisely because of that. Look at the height. Look at the height of Poland, at the apex of its power. It wasn't an ethno state. It was a state. It was a state built on slavery, on racially based slavery. The noblemen in Poland consider themselves to be the descendants of Sarmatians, whilst the serfs and the common people were, according to them, descended from Slavs. And moreover, they had another great justification for why they are in power and the common people are uh, subservient. They said, well, the nobility of the world is descended from Japhet, and the Jews from Sem, and the peasants from Ham, and they are cursed to work and toil the land.
Okay, well, I wasn't aware that of that particular political philosophy. And
Well, the word in Poland for a peasant is Ham. That's where that comes from.
okay.
That was in the early Middle Ages a popular justification, the curse of Ham, the son of Noah. And then when Europeans get more into contact uh, with Africans, it sort of shifted into.
Hmm. Oh, interesting, but we're getting a little bit off
Yes,
into the
but
weeds.
but my point is, when Poland was at the apex of its power, it wasn't an ethno state in the mind of its people. There was,
Hmm.
whether they were correct or not about these differences, and well, to some degree they probably weren't. They believed themselves to be one race occupying the other. When England was at the apex of its power, it was the Normans occupying the Anglo-Saxons. That was the whole uh, original idea behind the doctrine of Gobineau, that the Nordic race came and became the aristocracy for the Celts and the non-Nordic people.
Hmm.
The aristocracy of Europe considered itself to be a different race.
It's almost like human beings are more motivated when they see themselves as better than other people.
Well,
Seems
the
like there's
thing
something
is
there about human nature.
that the state is by nature divided into governed by into those who govern and those who are governed, and people will not submit their own brothers to such an arrangement. There must be a degree of antipathy for one group to consider itself to have the right to govern, and the others to be subjugated. When you have universal brotherhood in society, you will have democracy. And then the state will collapse into a third world socialism. And then the migrants will come and they will restore the order. They will proclaim themselves the new masters, the new conquerors. And in a few centuries, we're going to have the same arrangement. Hopefully, they'll convert to Christianity.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the hope for everyone, because Christ is King. Um, we're getting on an hour and a half here, and I think this is a good time to wrap it up. We kind of covered our main topics we wanted to talk about and got off into some other interesting topics of conversation. Um, I'm grateful for everybody that joined in on the chat. We had a pretty good chat going here for a little while, better than any live stream I've done before. So thanks, chat, for that. And if you haven't already, if you'd kindly like this video, put a comment on after we publish it, so that helps the algorithm promote it. We had a really good last week. We had a lot of new viewers, and we touched. I think we reached a lot of new people. Hopefully, they'll be coming back. Hopefully, they don't get scared away immediately. But thanks,
By
Michael.
me.
Um, uh, Michael and Nicholas, I'm very grateful for having you both on. Definitely made for some interesting conversation, much better than just me going at it alone. If we could get just any final comments you have on this and anything else, or if you want to do any promos or final commentary, please go ahead. Michael, we'll start with you.
I I invite everyone to keep watching our channel. It's going to get much better, much more controversial, but also much more grounded. We have both aspects, so
Yeah,
stay with
our
us.
strength is. I'm sorry. Our strength is in our diversity. We
Yes,
have
in our duality.
Yeah.
our duality. Yeah. Okay, Nicholas, please go ahead.
Well, I just want to thank you for having me on, and hopefully I can find ways to be on this channel more often, because I really enjoy these types of discussions. And it's, you don't get to have, we were talking about being disconnected from other people. You don't get to have these type of conversations a lot in the modern world. So that's a blessing. The internet can be a blessing and a curse, but it's a blessing in that regard that we can have these connections.
Yeah, totally agree. And I definitely learned a good deal here. And it's always nice having, as you said, we can learn a lot. One of the beautiful things about Catholicism is it unites all these different cultures and peoples from around the world at the same time. And we have very different views on practical things, but when it comes to the important things and the things that ground us, we're all in unity on. And, that's a beautiful thing. Um, so anyway, everyone, thanks for watching. Nicholas and Michael, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your insights and giving us your time. Um, and we'll hope to do it again soon. Thanks, everybody. God bless.